The text buzzed against a mahogany at exactly 7:03 p.m. Stuck at the office. Don't wait up. I didn't bother checking the sender. It was Claire. It always was. For the last 6 months, her office had become a geographic abstraction, a black hole where time and fidelity went to die. I stared at the blue bubble on my iPhone, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. I used to send back, "I'll reheat the lasagna drive safe. Love." Tonight, I typed fine and hit send before I could overthink the bitterness creeping into my grammar. I didn't go home to our place in Arlington. The thought of another night in that echoing house, listening to the HVAC rattle like a dying man's cough, made my skin crawl. Instead, I pointed my Audi toward King Street Grill. I wasn't hungry. I just needed a booth, a bottle of Weller, and the illusion of anonymity. I slid into a corner seat, ordered the bourbon neat, and pulled out the trial brief for the Hawthorne v. Sterling case. Judge Mallory was a stickler for procedural minutiae, and as a senior partner at Whitmore Strauss, I couldn't afford to look lazy. But the words on the page blurred. Claire Thorne, my wife, assistant Commonwealth's attorney for Fairfax County. She wielded her badge like a cudgel and her moral authority like a shield. She was the state's avenging angel until she came home. Lately, she'd been coming home less and less. And when she did, her left hand was conspicuously bare. 2 weeks ago, she'd announced she'd lost her wedding ring while reviewing exhibits at the courthouse. She'd barely looked up from her iPad when she said it, like she was reporting a missing stapler. I was halfway through my second pour when I saw them through the leaded glass window. Reflections first, streetlights glinting off metal, the distorted silhouettes of people laughing too loud for a Tuesday night. Then, clarity. Claire. She was standing on the steps of the district office building across the street, her head tilted back in a laugh that wasn't the type. Professional chuckle she reserved for the DA. This was real, unfiltered. I hadn't heard that sound in over a year. She was surrounded by a gaggle of junior attorneys, but my eyes locked on the kid next to her. Ethan Miller, Georgetown Law, top of his class. According to Claire's mentoring updates, he had that preppy, all-American look, gelled hair, a jawline sharp enough to open a letter, and a watch that cost more than my first car. And on his left hand, catching the amber glow of the street lamp as he gestured wildly about some legal victory, was a platinum band. My platinum band. The one with the brush finish I'd picked because Claire said it was understated. The one I'd paid $6,000 for at Tyson's Galleria. The one she'd lost. My blood didn't boil. It iced over. I set the glass down. The clink of crystal against what sounding like a gunshot in my ears. I peeled a 20 from my wallet, dropped it on the table, and stood up. My movements were deliberate, mechanical. I crossed the street, my Alan Edmonds hitting the pavement with a rhythm that felt like a countdown. The humid Virginia air stuck to my skin, but I didn't feel it. I felt nothing, just a cold, hard focus I usually reserve for cross-examining expert witnesses. Claire, I said, my voice cut through the din of the group's chatter like a scalpel. She turned. The laughter died in her throat, replaced by a flash of panic. She tried mask with indignation. Marcus, what are you doing here? Her eyes flicked to Ethan, then back to me. She was quick, always quick. We just wrapped the Henderson case. We're celebrating. Ethan puffed out his chest, trying to look unbothered, but I saw the way his Adam's apple bobbed. Mr. Thorne, he nodded, aiming for casual and landing somewhere near terrified. I didn't look at him. I kept my gaze locked on Claire. Take off the ring. Silence. A bus rumbled past, its brakes hissing, momentarily drowning out the static in my head. Someone nearby coughed. A car alarm chirped. What? Claire's face hardened into the mask she wore for hostile witnesses. Don't be absurd. The ring. Claire, the one on his finger. It's the one I gave you. The one you claimed you lost 2 weeks ago when you were too busy to help me tear apart the laundry room looking for it. I took a step closer, into her space. Take it off, or I'll do it for him. And I'll make sure every partner at your firm, every judge in the Arlington circuit, And every reporter at the Washington Post sees the photos I'm about to take. Ethan found his voice, though it cracked. Dude, back off. Shut up, Ethan. I snapped, still staring at Claire. This is between me and the woman who's been perjuring herself over breakfast for the last 14 days. Claire's jaw tightened. She hated being cornered. She reached out, grabbed Ethan's hand, none too gently, and yanked the ring off his finger. She held it out to me like it was a piece of evidence she wanted no part of. Here, are you happy now? It's just a ring. Marcus. I took it. It was warm. From his skin. The engraving on the inside MC. 10, 12, 15 asterisks burned into my fingertip. Just a ring? You told me it was insured for $5,000. You told me it had sentimental value. You told me you loved me 3 days ago over burnt toast. I do love you, she said, but her eyes were cold, the way a shark's eyes are cold. But you're boring. Marcus, you're predictable. You come home at 6. You eat the same turkey sandwich for lunch every day. You talk about torts and contract law that puts people to sleep. Ethan has fire. That's why you gave him our wedding ring? To stoke his fire? I let out a laugh, harsh and dry. Or was it because you needed a placeholder while you figured out how to tell me you've been screwing the help? Ethan stepped forward, his hand brushing Claire's arm. Claire, we don't have to take this. He's acting unhinged. I leaned in, close enough to smell the Hendrix gin on her breath, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her irises that used to make my heart stutter. Unhinged? I'm a senior partner at Whitmore Strauss. I know exactly how to handle a hostile witness and a case of marital fraud. You want to play with fire? Claire? Fine, but I'm the one holding the matches now. I'm going home. I suggest you don't follow me. If I see either of you near my house tonight, I'm calling the Fairfax County PD and filing a restraining order for theft of personal property. And then I'm filing for divorce. Let's see how fire looks on the witness stand under oath when I ask you about chain of custody and intent to deprive. I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I could feel their stares like lasers on my neck. In my car, I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I looked at the ring in my palm. It wasn't just a ring anymore. It was Exhibit A, and I was going to build a case so airtight. Even the most sympathetic judge in the Commonwealth would have to rule in my favor. The boring husband was done. The litigator was taking over. I drove home on autopilot. The GPS in my head navigated the familiar turns while my mind raced through statutes. Virginia was a hybrid equitable distribution state. Adultery could impact spousal support, alimony. If I could prove fault, Claire got nothing. The ring was marital property, a gift that became hers upon marriage. But if she converted it, stolen it to give to her lover, that was a crime. Petit larceny, grand larceny. Given the value, I could have her arrested. The thought was a cold comfort. When I got home, the house was dark. I didn't turn on the lights. I went straight to my study, closed the door, and poured myself another drink from the decanter I kept in the bottom drawer. I sat at my desk and placed the ring under the beam of my green banker's lamp. I pulled out my phone and started recording a video. July 16th, 8:14 p.m. This is Marcus Thorne. Present in my possession is a platinum wedding band. Serial number, I squinted at the inside edge, 7 Alpha, 492 Beta. This item was recovered this evening from one Ethan Miller, an intern at the Fairfax County Commonwealth's Attorney's Office. My wife, Claire Thorne, Ada, falsely reported this item as lost on July 2nd. It appears she gifted it to Mr. Miller. This constitutes conversion of marital assets and potential criminal theft. I am logging this as evidence in anticipation of divorce proceedings. End recording. I saved the file to a secure cloud folder, then backed it up to an encrypted drive. I was methodical, clinical, like I was preparing for a merger, not a marriage dissolution. My phone buzzed. Claire, I let it ring. Then the text started flooding in. We need to talk. You embarrass me in front of my colleagues. It's not what it looks like. Marcus, please, I'm your wife. I didn't reply. Silence is a powerful tool in litigation. It creates uncertainty. I wanted her stewing, wondering if I was already on the line with Halberstam Weiss, the most vicious divorce firm in Northern Virginia. I imagined her sitting in her car outside our house, clutching the steering wheel, her perfect prosecutor's composure cracking. Good. Let her feel the walls closing in. At 11:30 p.m., my home security app pinged. Motion detected at the front door. I pulled up the camera feed. Claire was standing there, her arms wrapped around herself. She looked small, vulnerable. It was an act. I knew her tells. The slight tremor in her lower lip, the way she shifted her weight from foot to foot. She was scared. She rang the bell. Once, twice. I watched her through the lens, my finger hovering over the disable alarm button. I didn't press it. After 5 minutes, she gave up and walked back to her car, a leased BMW she couldn't afford without my income. She sat behind the wheel for a long time before driving away. I stayed in my study until dawn. I drafted the initial pleadings. In the matter of the marriage of Thorne, grounds, adultery and cruelty, prayer for relief, dissolution of marriage, sole ownership of the marital residence, restoration of separate property, and denial of spousal support. I attached a copy of the photo I'd taken of Ethan's hand earlier that night. The ring was unmistakable. As the sun began to lighten the sky over Arlington, I poured the dregs of the bourbon into my glass and knocked it back. My hand was steady. My mind was clear. The woman I'd married 8 years ago had vanished, replaced by this ambitious, selfish stranger who thought she could play fast and loose with the rules. But I knew the rules better than she did. I'd spent my career exploiting loopholes and enforcing contracts. Our marriage was a contract. She'd breached it. Now, I was going to enforce the penalty clause. I stood up, straightened my tie in the reflection of the window, and walked out of the study. I didn't bother making coffee. I didn't bother checking the bedroom. I grabbed my briefcase and headed for the door. As I passed the hall mirror, I caught a glimpse of myself. My eyes were hard, cold. I looked like a man who just buried his wife and was already calculating the inheritance tax. I stepped out into the morning air. The birds were singing. The neighborhood was waking up. Somewhere, Claire was probably rehearsing her opening statement for the fight of her life. Let her rehearse. I had the evidence. I had the law, and I had nothing left to lose. The case was open, and I was going to win. The drive to D.C. was smooth. I parked in my reserved spot in the garage beneath our building. Sarah, my assistant, was already at her desk when I stepped off the elevator. She took one look at my face and didn't say a word. She just handed me the morning's mail and a fresh cup of black coffee. Exactly how I liked it. Hold my calls. I told her, unless it's Jack Henderson or someone from the Bar Association. Yes, Mr. Thorne, she said, her fingers already flying over her keyboard. I shut my office door and leaned against it. I looked at the ring again. It felt heavier now. I opened my top drawer, pulled out a small velvet pouch, and slipped the ring inside. I sealed it in a manila envelope and wrote Exhibit A on the front in thick black marker. Then I placed it in the safe behind the portrait of Justice Holmes. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. I started typing. Not a brief, not a motion. An email to Richard Halberstam, Claire's soon-to-be ex-lawyer. Dick, this is Marcus Thorne. I'm sure Claire's filled you in on last night's events. I'm attaching a photo for your reference. I'll be filing for divorce this afternoon on grounds of adultery and conversion of marital assets. I'm seeking an emergency injunction to freeze all joint accounts and temporary exclusive use of the marital residence. If you advise your client to contest this, I will pursue criminal charges for grand larceny. The choice is hers. Settle or burn. Regards, Marcus. I hit send. Then I leaned back and looked out at the Washington Monument, piercing the morning haze. I felt a strange sense of calm. The chaos of the night before had crystallized into a singular purpose. This wasn't about hurt anymore. It was about justice, about accountability. Claire had spent her career putting people behind bars for breaking the law. Now, She was going to learn what it felt like to be on the other side of the gavel. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, probably Claire, using a burner. I opened it. "You're a monster. I hope you rot." I smiled. A real smile. I typed back a single word. "Guilty." I dropped the phone in the drawer and got back to work. The Henderson case wasn't going to win itself, and neither was my divorce. But I knew how to litigate. I knew how to win. And this time, the stakes were personal. The prosecutor had finally met her match, and I was just getting started. The email to Dick Halberstam went out at 8:17 a.m. By 8:42, my phone was vibrating on the desk like a trapped hornet. I didn't need caller ID to know who it was. I let it ring through to voicemail. The second call came in at 8:43. Same result. On the third ring, I picked up, not because I wanted to talk, but because I wanted her to hear the silence. "Marcus." Claire's voice cut through the line, tight and frayed at the edges. "You pompous son of a bitch. You think sending an email to my counsel before I've even had my coffee is going to scare me?" I leaned back in my chair, swiveling to look out at the drizzle obscuring the National Mall. "Counsel? You mean Dick Halberstam? I'm sure he's already drafting his retainer agreement. It'll cost you a month's salary just to have him return my call. Claire, and judging by our joint account activity last quarter, you can't afford that." "I don't need this right now," she hissed. "We can handle this like adults. I'll bring the ring back. We can talk about—" "There is no we. Claire, there hasn't been since you slid that band onto his finger. This is a negotiation. It's a notice of default. Check your inbox. I've already sent the draft petition to Halberstam. Adultery, conversion, intentional infliction of emotional distress. I'm feeling generous. So I left out criminal conspiracy. You're insane." She spat. "You're trying to destroy my career over a piece of jewelry." "A piece of jewelry?" I laughed, cold and dry. "It's not the ring. Claire, it's the principle of chain of custody. You took marital property, misrepresented its location, and transferred it to a third party to facilitate an adulterous relationship. In my world, that's called fraudulent conveyance. In yours, it's called a felony. How's that going to play at the Bar Association's next ethics hearing?" She went silent for a beat. When she spoke again, the anger was laced with something else. "Fear. What do you want? Marcus? Money? The house? Just name your price. I want you out of my life. I want the divorce granted on fault-based grounds, so you never see a dime of my future earnings. And I want you to explain to Jack Henderson why his star ADA is named in a civil suit involving stolen property. I'm sure he'll love explaining that to voters. You wouldn't dare involve Jack." She whispered. "He's known me for 10 years. He'll believe me over you. Jack Henderson is a pragmatist. He cares about his conviction rate and his reputation. If I send him that photo of Ethan wearing your ring, Jack's reputation takes a hit. Worse, it opens the door for every defense attorney in Northern Virginia to question the integrity of your past cases. You think the Commonwealth v. Ramirez verdict holds up if the prosecutor was busy passing her wedding ring to her intern? I'd be doing Jack a favor by forcing your resignation before the disciplinary board gets involved." She hung up. No dramatic farewell. Just the dead tone of a woman realizing her leverage had evaporated. I placed the phone back in the cradle. Sarah buzzed in. "Mr. Thorne, Richard Halberstam is on line 2. He sounds agitated. Put him through. Marcus." Halberstam's voice boomed. All bluster and false camaraderie. "What the hell is this email? My client says you're blowing things out of proportion. A misunderstanding with a ring? Dick, save the song and dance. I have video evidence of Claire removing the ring from Ethan Miller's finger last night outside the district office. I have the time-stamped insurance claim. She filed for a lost ring 2 weeks ago. I have bank records showing a $1, $200 charge at the Morrison House Hotel on June 28th. The same night Claire told me she was pulling an all-nighter at the courthouse. And I have a subpoena ready for Ethan Miller's cell phone records. You want to argue misunderstanding in front of Judge Geller? Be my guest. But when I move for sanctions based on spoliation of evidence, Don't say I didn't warn you. A pause. Halberstam wasn't used to being on the receiving end of a discovery dump. Let's be reasonable. Claire is willing to walk away from a house. She won't touch your retirement accounts. Let's keep this quiet. No criminal referrals. Criminal referral is non-negotiable if she contests the divorce. I said flatly, but if she signs a stipulation, I'm sending over within the hour. Sole custody of Scout. Waiver of alimony. Quick claim deed on the Arlington property. I'll hold off on filing the police report. She has until 5 o'clock. After that, I start making phone calls. Starting with Jack Henderson. I hung up before he could respond. The ball was in their court. I spent the next hour reviewing the financials. Claire's spending had gone off a cliff in the last 6 months. Dinners at Le Diplomate, charges at Saks, and a suspicious monthly withdrawal of $800 labeled cash. I ran the numbers through our budgeting software. It didn't add up. Her salary couldn't cover the lifestyle she was suddenly living. Where was the money coming from? Ethan Miller was an intern. He wasn't exactly flush. Unless Claire was dipping into her trust account, that would be career suicide. But then, Claire had never been one to think past her next win. At 11:15, Sarah buzzed again. Mr. Thorne, Claire is here. She doesn't have an appointment. Send her in. I closed the financial spreadsheets and opened the photo of Ethan's hand. I wanted her to see it on my screen when she walked in. The door flew open. Claire stood there, looking like she'd dressed in the dark, wrinkled blouse, skirt slightly askew, hair falling out of its usually immaculate chignon. She looked tired, defeated. Good. Get out, I said without looking up. Sarah will show you to the lobby if you can't find the door yourself. We are not doing this here, she snapped, slamming the door behind her. Do you have any idea what you're doing to my reputation? To my career? I'm protecting my assets. I corrected, finally meeting her gaze, and documenting your misconduct. Sit down. Claire, or don't. I don't care. But if you stand there screeching, I'll have security escort you out. And that will look fantastic on the security footage Halberstam will have to explain to the judge. She hesitated, then sank into the chair opposite my desk. Her eyes landed on the monitor. The photo of Ethan's ring-clad hand filled the screen. Her face paled. You're really going to use that? I'm really going to use everything, I said, tapping a manila folder on my desk. Starting with this. Your Amex statement from June. Care to explain the $400 charge at La Maison du Chocolat? I didn't get any chocolates for Valentine's Day. Or was that a gift for Ethan? She flinched. That was a thank you gift for helping with the Henderson briefs. Bullshit, I said mildly. Ethan doesn't like chocolate. I saw his Twitter feed. He's allergic to tree nuts. Those were assorted pralines. Claire, expensive ones. And then there's this. I slid another statement across the desk. The Morrison House, room 412. 2 nights, paid in cash. Same week you told me you were in Richmond for a continuing legal ed seminar. Funny thing, the seminar was canceled due to flooding. I checked. You're spying on me, she whispered, her hands twisting in her lap. I'm auditing our marriage. I replied, and the audit is failing. Claire, miserably, you've got $12,000 in unexplained credit card debt, cash withdrawals that match Ethan's sudden ability to lease a new Audi, and a pattern of lying that would make a perjurer blush. You want to talk about reputation? Let's talk about the email I just got from the Virginia State Bar's ethics hotline. Seems they take a dim view of prosecutors using marital assets to fund extramarital affairs. Her head snapped up. You contacted the bar? Are you trying to get me disbarred? I'm ensuring there's a paper trail. I said, if you're disbarred, it's because you broke the rules, not because I tattled. But let's be clear, if you fight me on this divorce, I will depose Ethan. I will subpoena every text, every email, every hotel receipt. I will ask him under oath if you promise him a job in exchange for sex. I will ask him if you ever discuss my cases with him. And then I will watch you squirm while Halberstam objects to every question, knowing full well that the judge will overrule him because the truth is relevant. Is that the career highlight reel you want? Claire, assistant Commonwealth's attorney, impeached by her own husband. She stared at me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. But I knew better than to mistake them for remorse. They were tears of frustration, tears of a woman who'd finally realized she wasn't the smartest person in the room anymore. You used to love me, she said softly, almost pleading. What happened to us? Marcus? What happened is that you stopped loving me the day you decided your ego was more important than your vows. I said, you used to come home and tell me about your cases because you wanted my input. Now you come home and lie about where you've been because you don't value my trust. You want to know what happened? I grew up. I stopped seeing you as the brilliant prosecutor who swept me off my feet and started seeing you as the woman who steals from her husband to buy gifts for her boy toy. That's what happened. She stood up abruptly, knocking over the chair. Fine. Have it your way. I'll sign your damn papers. But don't think for a second this makes you the victim. Marcus, you drove me to this. Your constant need for order. Your obsession with control. I'm a litigator. Claire, control is my job. I interrupted. And right now, I'm controlling the exit strategy. Sign the stipulation by 5. If I don't have it by then, I'm filing the criminal complaint. And I'm not stopping at grand larceny. I'll add embezzlement if those trust account records don't balance. Now get out and close the door on your way out. I have a 9-figure merger to finalize, and your drama is cutting into my billable hours. She stood there, trembling with rage, her fists clenched at her sides. For a moment, I thought she might actually lunge across the desk. Then, with a strangled sound, she turned and yanked the door open. She didn't slam it. She didn't have the dignity left for that. She just walked out, her shoulders hunched, leaving a trail of expensive perfume that smelled like regret. Sarah appeared in the doorway a moment later. Mr. Thorne, should I cancel your 3 o'clock? No, I said, turning back to my computer. But if Claire comes back, call security. And Sarah, if Dick Halberstam calls, tell him I expect that signed stipulation by 4:30. Not 5, 4:30. I want time to review it before the courthouse closes. Yes, sir. She hesitated. Is everything? Okay, everything is proceeding according to discovery, I said without looking up. That's all that matters. I heard her retreat, the door clicking shut. I stared at the photo of Ethan's hand on my screen. The ring looked so small there, so insignificant, yet it had unraveled everything. I opened a new document and began drafting the motion for a temporary restraining order. I needed to ensure Claire didn't try to liquidate any more assets before the ink was dry. I worked through lunch, fueled by black coffee and a cold fury that kept my focus razor sharp. At 4:25 p.m., Sarah buzzed in. Mr. Thorne, Halberstam's paralegal just delivered a package via courier. Scan it and send it to my secure drive. I ordered, then delete the original. Already done. Sir, I opened the file. 23 pages of legalese. But the key points were highlighted. Waiver of spousal support. Quitclaim deed attached. Sole custody of Scout awarded to petitioner. Claire had signed. She'd folded faster than I expected. Maybe Halberstam had finally talked some sense into her. Or maybe she'd realized that fighting me would only expose more of her lies. Either way, the battle was won. But the war wasn't over. I still had to file the papers. Still had to face her in court for the final decree. And I still had to decide whether to follow through on the criminal referral. As I saved the signed stipulation, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Probably Claire, using another burner. I opened it. You win. Hope it was worth it. I hope you die alone. I stared at the words. No anger. No satisfaction. Just a cold, empty recognition. She didn't understand. It wasn't about winning. It was about survival. About making sure she never had the chance to burn me again. I deleted the text, added Ethan Miller's name to my digital blacklist, and went back to work on the merger. The divorce was a distraction, a necessary one, but a distraction nonetheless. I had a firm to run, clients to serve, and a life to rebuild. Claire Thorne was yesterday's news. and I was done reading the headlines. I left the office at 7. The rain had stopped, leaving the air crisp and cool. I drove home, the city lights blurring past, for the first time in months. I didn't dread walking through the front door. The house was still quiet, but it felt different now, like a crime scene that had finally been processed. I hung my coat, poured myself 2 fingers of Macallan, and sat in the study. I pulled the velvet pouch from the safe and emptied the ring into my palm. I turned it over, watching the light catch the engraving. MC, 10, 12, 15. It seemed like a lifetime ago. Maybe it was. I placed the ring back in the pouch and sealed it in an envelope marked evidence destroyed. Do not open. I'd keep it for a year, then melt it down. Let the metal be repurposed. Let the memory fade. I had a new case to build now. One where I was the only stakeholder. One where the only verdict that mattered was my own peace of mind. I raised a glass in a silent toast to the empty room, to discovery. I murmured, may it always lead to the truth. Then I drank, the whiskey burning a clean path down my throat. The chapter was closed. The next one was mine to write. The deposition was scheduled for 9 a.m. in a borrowed conference room at Halberstam's McLean office. I arrived at 8:45, carrying a leather binder and a digital recorder. Sarah followed with a box of exhibits. Dick Halberstam was already there, nursing a coffee and looking like he'd slept in a suit. Beside him sat Ethan Miller, wearing a navy blazer that was at least 2 sizes too big. The kids, and he was bouncing like a piston. Good. Nerves made witnesses sloppy. Claire was late. At 9:02, she swept in, flanked by a junior associate Halberstam had brought in to take notes. She looked like she'd fought a war with her eyeliner that morning. She didn't look at me. She sat down, crossed her legs, and stared at the grain of the mahogany table like it held the secrets of the universe. Shall we begin? Halberstam asked, his tone all fake congeniality. He nodded to the court reporter, a bored-looking woman in the corner. Please swear in, Mr. Miller. The reporter droned through the oath. Ethan mumbled, I do, his voice cracking on the second syllable. I opened my binder. Mr. Miller, state your full name for the record. Ethan Christopher Miller. Age, 24. Occupation, law student. Intern at the Fairfax County Commonwealth's Attorney's Office. I leaned back, steepling my fingers. Mr. Miller, are you currently, or have you ever been, romantically involved with Claire Thorne, the respondent in this matter? Halberstam shot up. Objection, relevance, and potential self-incrimination. My client invokes his Fifth Amendment rights. Sit down. Dick, I said, not raising my voice. We're not in criminal court. Yet. And the Fifth doesn't apply to adultery in a civil deposition. Mr. Miller, the question stands. Were you sleeping with my wife? Claire's head snapped up, her eyes blazing. Marcus, you bastard. Mrs. Thorne, please, I said, cutting her off. Let the witness answer. Or would you prefer to answer the question yourself? Under oath? Ethan looked like a deer in the headlights. He glanced at Claire, then at Halberstam, then back at me. His mouth opened and closed. Finally, he whispered, yes. Halberstam groaned and buried his face in his hands. Claire went rigid, her nails digging into the polished wood. Louder for the record. Mr. Miller, I prompted. Yes, he said. Louder. We were involved. Involved. I repeated, tasting the word. How long was this involvement ongoing? Since May. He admitted, a few months. And during this period, did Mrs. Thorne ever discuss her marital status with you? She said it was complicated, that you two were basically separated. I turned to Claire. Is that true? Claire, did you file a separation agreement? Did you change your withholding status? Or did you just tell him that so you could justify handing over our wedding ring? Objection. Halberstam wheezed. Argumentative. Sustained. The reporter muttered. I ignored them. I reached into my binder and pulled out the plastic evidence bag. Inside, the platinum band gleamed under the fluorescent lights. I slid it across the table. Mr. Miller, do you recognize this item? Ethan's face drained a color. He stared at the bag like it was a live grenade. Yeah, I recognize it. Where did you last see it? On my finger. Until that night outside the district office. And how did it get onto your finger? Mr. Miller? He swallowed hard. Mrs. Thorne. She gave it to me. She gave it to you. I echoed. Was this a gift? Mr. Miller? Or was it consideration for services rendered? Objection. Halberstam roared, finally finding his voice. That's demeaning and irrelevant. It's incredibly relevant. Dick, I said, turning to him. It goes to intent. If Claire gave him the ring as a gift, it's conversion of marital assets. If she gave it to him as part of an ongoing affair, it's evidence of adultery. Both are ground for divorce in Virginia. Now, sit down and let the witness answer, or I'll move to strike his testimony entirely for lack of candor. Halberstam sank back into his chair. Defeated, I looked at Ethan. Mr. Miller, why did she give you the ring? Ethan looked at Claire, his eyes pleading. She refused to meet his gaze. She said it didn't fit her anymore, that she wanted me to have it as a symbol. A symbol of what? Mr. Miller? I pressed. A symbol that she was replacing me? A symbol that your relationship was more than just a casual fling? I don't know, he whispered. She just said it was mine. I picked up the bag, holding it up so the light caught the engraving. Notice anything on the inside? Mr. Miller? Engraved text? He squinted. It looks like letters and numbers. MC. 10, 12, 15. I read aloud. My initials. Claire's initials. Our wedding date. October 12th, 2015. Does that look like a gift meant for you, Mr. Miller? Or does it look like a piece of stolen property that my wife deliberately passed off to her lover to erase me from her life? Tears welled in Ethan's eyes. He looked utterly miserable. I didn't know. Man, I swear, I didn't know she was still. I thought she was telling the truth. You thought wrong. I said, my voice cold. And now you're part of a legal record that will follow you for the rest of your career. How do you think the Virginia Bar Association will look at an applicant who admits to accepting stolen goods from a married woman, especially one who works in the same office? Claire finally snapped. She surged to her feet, pointing a trembling finger at me. You're enjoying this. You're a sadistic prick. Marcus, you're ruining his life over a piece of metal. I'm not ruining his life. Claire, I said, standing to meet her glare. You did that when you corrupted a kid who just wanted to be a lawyer. You used him. You used him to get back at me for being boring. And now, he's realizing that the woman he idolized is just a thief and a liar. Isn't that right, Mr. Miller? Ethan nodded, wiping his nose on his sleeve. Yeah, it is. Claire looked around the room, her chest heaving. She saw no allies. Halberstam was studying his shoes. The junior associate was staring intently at her notepad. The court reporter was just waiting for someone to say something interesting. I have no further questions for Mr. Miller at this time, I said, sitting back down. However, I reserve the right to recall him. Dick, I assume you'd like to redirect? Halberstam waved a hand weakly. No redirect. My client moves to strike the entire testimony as prejudicial. Denied, I said, before the reporter could even log the motion. The testimony is admissible. Mr. Miller, you're excused, but don't leave the jurisdiction. I may need you for the final hearing. Ethan stumbled out of the room, his shoulders shaking. Claire sank back into her chair, looking like she'd been physically struck. Halberstam cleared his throat. Marcus, this is unprecedented. You're destroying her. Can't we just settle? She'll sign anything. Let's keep this out of the public record. It's already in the public record. Dick, I said, gathering my papers. The deposition transcript will be filed with the court this afternoon, and I'm not done. Claire, I have a few questions for you now, specifically about the $4. 000 cash withdrawal you made on June 15th. Was that for Mr. Miller's new Audi? Or was it for the weekend at the Primland resort you booked under the name C. Miller? Her head whipped up. How did you? Discovery. Claire, I said, I have your bank records. I have your hotel receipts. I have the geofencing data from your phone that places you in Roanoke. When you told me you were in Richmond, I have everything. And I'm going to lay it all out in my motion for final judgment. Every lie, every stolen dollar, every sordid detail. By the time I'm done, the only thing you'll be prosecuting is a case for unemployment benefits. I stood up, straightening my tie. Sarah will send over the final stipulation. I want it signed by noon tomorrow. If I don't have it, I'm filing a criminal complaint for grand larceny and embezzlement, and I'm sending a copy of this deposition to Jack Henderson personally. Think about that tonight. Claire, think about facing the grievance committee and explaining why you thought it was appropriate to give your husband's ring to your intern. Think about what disbarment sounds like rolling off a judge's tongue, because I guarantee you'll be hearing it soon. I walked out, leaving them in the suffocating silence of the conference room. Sarah was waiting by the elevator. Sir, everything go as planned? Better, I said, pressing the button. Ethan broke. Claire cracked. Halberstam looks like he's about to have a coronary. The case is effectively over. And the criminal referral? Hold on that. For now, if she signs, we close the book. If she doesn't, I let the sentence hang. The elevator doors opened. I stepped in, watching Sarah's reflection in the polished metal. If she doesn't, Dick, I want you to draft a complaint. Include every statute you can find. I want her to feel the full weight of the law she used to wield. Yes, sir. The doors closed. I rode down to the garage. The adrenaline finally starting to ebb. I'd done it. I'd taken the prosecutor's own tricks and used them against her. I'd exposed the lies, shattered the illusions, and forced her to confront the consequences of her actions. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like justice. Cold, hard, and impersonal. I got into my car and drove away, leaving the wreckage of my marriage behind me. The next chapter was a final judgment, and I intended to be the one writing it. The call came in at 7:20 a.m. Not Claire, Jack Henderson. I recognized the number. Had it on speed dial from the years we played golf at the country club. I let it ring twice before picking up, already pouring my first coffee of the day. Marcus. Jack's voice rumbled, devoid of its usual pretense of friendship. I just got off the phone with Dick Halberstam, and I've seen the deposition transcript. I leaned against the kitchen island, watching the steam curl from the mug. Morning, Jack. I trust you've also reviewed the financial appendices I sent over yesterday? A heavy sigh traveled down the line. I'm not calling about the finances. Marcus, I'm calling about Claire. She's suspended, effective immediately, pending an internal ethics review. The bar's already sniffing around. This is a goddamn catastrophe for the office. It's a catastrophe she built herself. I said, my tone flat. I didn't forge her signature on the hotel ledger. Jack, I didn't put that ring on Ethan Miller's finger. I'm just the one holding the evidence. You're holding a grudge. He countered, but there was no heat in it, just exhaustion. You could have come to me. We could have handled this quietly. Now it's a circus. The pasta's already sniffing around for comment. Quietly? I laughed. A dry, humorless sound. She stole from me. She lied under oath, perjury. Jack, let's call it what it is. And you wanted to handle it quietly so she can keep drawing a paycheck while she destroys evidence? No, I'm not your damage control. Jack, I'm the aggrieved party, and I intend to be made whole. She's got nothing left. Marcus, Halberstam dropped her. The firm won't touch her. She's asking if you'll reconsider the criminal referral. Maybe just accept the settlement and walk away. Walk away? I set the coffee down, my grip tightening on the phone. Tell her to walk away from the $4. 000 she withdrew from our joint savings 2 weeks before she lost the ring. Tell her to walk away from the perjury she committed when she filed that insurance claim. I'm not a charity. Jack, I'm a litigator, and Claire is a liability I'm done insuring. There was a long pause. She's saying you're obsessed. Marcus, that you're dragging this out to punish her. Punish her? I said softly, the anger finally bleeding into something colder. No, Jack, punishment is what the jury does. I'm just ensuring the trial happens. You taught me that. Control the narrative. Control the verdict. Right now, the narrative is that Claire Thorne is a thief. The verdict will reflect that if she wants mercy. She should have thought about that before she made a fool out of me in public. Jack sighed again, deeper this time. All right, I won't ask again. But Marcus, this is Claire. You loved her once. Once. I agreed. Past tense. Now she's just a case file. And I'm closing it. Talk to Halberstam. The stipulation needs to be signed by noon. Or I file the criminal complaint at 12:01. Have a good day. Jack. I hung up before he could respond. The house felt too quiet. I finished my coffee, showered, and dressed in a charcoal suit. Sarah texted as I was backing out of the garage. Claire Thorne at the front desk. Insists on seeing you. Security is on standby. I replied, send her up, alone. She arrived at my office 15 minutes later. I didn't look up from the merger documents when she entered. She looked like hell. No makeup, hair limp, wearing a stained sweatshirt and jeans. The uniform of a woman who'd lost her armor. Sarah closed the door softly behind her. Get out, I said, turning a page. Marcus, please. Her voice was raw, scratchy. She sounded like she'd been screaming. Just listen to me. You have 30 seconds before I call security. I glanced at my watch. 29. She sank into the chair opposite my desk, her hands twisting in her lap. I lost my job today. Official notice came an hour ago. They cited conduct unbecoming in breach of fiduciary duty. Halberstam dropped me this morning. I can't pay him. I can't pay rent. I have nothing. No career. No money. No one. Not my problem. I said, returning to the document. You made your choices. I'm simply enforcing the consequences. It is your problem. She exploded, surging forward. You did this. You ruined me. You could have just let me go. Marcus, you could have been the bigger person. You could have taken a high road. I looked up then, meeting her gaze. Her eyes were red, but there were no tears. Just a hollow, venomous rage. The high road? I repeated. You want to talk about the high road? You're the one who committed adultery in a jurisdiction that recognizes fault-based divorce. You're the one who converted marital assets to fund your affair. You're the one who perjured herself to an insurance adjuster. And now you want me to be the bigger person and bail you out? No, Claire. The bigger person would have respected the vows they took. The bigger person wouldn't have needed a grand jury indictment to realize they were a terrible human being. I said I was sorry. She shrieked, the sound bouncing off the walls. You said you were sorry you got caught. I corrected. There's a difference. You're not sorry you did it. You're sorry it cost you your job. You're sorry Ethan won't return your calls. You're sorry the world finally sees you the way I've seen you for the last 6 months. But you're not sorry you hurt me. If you were, you wouldn't be here demanding I fix it. You'd be figuring out how to fix yourself. She deflated, slumping back into the chair. What do you want from me? Marcus? I signed your stupid papers. I gave you the house. I gave you Scout. What more do you want? I want you to disappear. I said, standing up. I walked around the desk, leaning against it. So I towered over her. I want you to stop calling my friends, my colleagues, my family. I want you to stop using my name to try to salvage your career. I want you to accept that you are no longer a part of my life. And most of all, I want you to understand that the criminal referral isn't about revenge. It's about deterrence. If I let you walk away without consequence, what does that say about the value of the vows you broke? What does that say about the law you used to swear by? You're a monster, she whispered. I'm a man who trusted you. I said, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper. And you made a mockery of that trust. Now, you're going to live with the fallout every day. Claire, every time you fill out a job application, and have to check the box that says, "Have you ever been terminated for cause?" Every time you try to explain to a new boyfriend why you're not allowed within 500 feet of the Fairfax County Courthouse. Every time you look at your bare ring finger and remember that you gave away to a kid who couldn't even pass a background check. That's your life now. And I'm just the guy who made sure the record reflected the truth. I pushed off the desk and walked to the door, opening it. "Get out." She didn't move. She just stared at me, her face a mask of despair and hatred. "I hope you rot. Marcus, I hope you die alone in this big, empty house with your precious law books and your cold, dead heart. Better alone than a fool." I said, "Now get out," before I change my mind and call the police for trespassing. That broke her. She stood up on shaky legs. Swaying slightly, she walked to the door, pausing in the threshold. She looked back at me, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of the woman I'd married. Then it was gone, replaced by the hollow shell of Claire Thorne, former ADA. "Goodbye, Marcus," she whispered. "Goodbye, Claire," I replied, and I closed the door. I locked it, then I deadbolted. I leaned against the solid wood, listening to her footsteps recede down the hall. Sarah's voice, soft and professional. "Ms. Thorne, this way out." Then silence. I walked back to my desk and sat down. My hands were steady. My breathing was normal. I picked up the phone and dialed Sarah. Send the signed stipulation to my desk. And confirm with Halberstam that the criminal referral is officially on hold, pending her compliance with the final decree. "Yes, Mr. Thorne." I hung up. I looked at the photo of Ethan's hand on my screen, then closed the window. I opened the final motion, a motion to dismiss all remaining counterclaims. It was formality now. The war was over. Claire had surrendered. All that was left was the paperwork and the silence. I spent the rest of the morning finalizing the merger. At noon, Sarah buzzed in. "Mr. Thorne, Halberstam's paralegal just confirmed. The stipulation is signed and filed. The judge signed the temporary orders this morning." "Thank you, Sarah." I leaned back, looking out at the rain starting to streak the windows. "And the criminal referral?" "On hold, as requested. Halberstam says his client understands the terms." "Good." I paused. "Sarah, if Claire Thorne calls again, take a message, but don't put her through. And if she shows up here again, call security and have her removed. Permanently." "Understood, sir." I ended the call. I swiveled my chair to face the city. The rain was coming down harder now, washing the streets clean. I thought about Claire, out there somewhere, starting her new life, a life without a ring, without a title, without a safety net, a life of her own making. It wasn't mercy. It was justice. Cold, precise, and final. I turned back to my desk and picked up the pen. I signed the final motion with a flourish. Motion to dismiss. It felt right. The case was closed. The defendant was dismissed. And the plaintiff was finally, irrevocably, free. I set the pen down and allowed myself a small, cold smile. Let her rot. I had a merger to close and a life to rebuild. Without her, the courtroom smelled like lemon polish and old paper. Judge Patricia Geller, a woman who'd seen every flavor of human failure in her 30 years on the bench, sat behind the mahogany like a hawk surveying field mice. I was at counsel table, alone. Claire was across the aisle with a fresh-faced associate from legal aid. Halberstam had bailed the second the ink dried on the stipulation. The kid looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Claire didn't look up when I entered. She was staring at her hands, folded tightly in her lap. No ring, no power suit, just a cheap, off-the-rack pantsuit that hung on her like a shroud. She'd lost weight. Her hair was dull. The fire Ethan Miller had mentioned 6 months ago was out, replaced by the smoldering ash of a career self-immolated. Case number FC 2024-1872. Thorne v. Thorne. The clerk droned. Petitioner present? Respondent? I stood. Marcus Thorne. Appearing pro se for the petitioner. The legal aid kid scrambled up. Benjamin Carter. For the respondent. Your Honor, Judge Geller didn't look up from the file. Mr. Carter, I've reviewed the signed stipulation. Waiver of spousal support. Quick claim deed on the Arlington property. Sole custody of the dog to Mr. Thorne. Is your client contesting any aspect of this agreement today? Carter glanced nervously at Claire. She gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of her head. No, Your Honor. Ms. Thorne, Mrs. Thorne, accepts the terms as presented. Geller finally looked up, her gaze sweeping over Claire with open disdain. Mrs. Thorne, you understand that by signing this stipulation, you are forever waiving any right to alimony, any claim to your husband's retirement accounts, and any future interest in the marital home? You also understand that this court has taken judicial notice of the evidence submitted regarding the dissipation of marital assets and the adulterous relationship, which forms the basis for this fault-based divorce. Claire's voice was a rusty whisper. Yes, Your Honor. I've seen a lot of ugly divorces. Mrs. Thorne, Geller continued, her tone like gravel. But the theft of a wedding ring to give to a paramour while simultaneously filing a false insurance claim. That's a new low. It speaks to a profound lack of judgment and a complete disregard for the institution of marriage. It also raises serious questions about your fitness to practice law, which I trust the Virginia State Bar is already addressing. Carter coughed. Your Honor, my client's personal difficulties are not. Mr. Carter, sit down. Geller snapped. She turned back to Claire. Mrs. Thorne, you brought this humiliation on yourself. Mr. Thorne has been more than generous in not pursuing criminal charges, though God knows he'd have a slam-dunk case for grand larceny. Consider this dissolution your only mercy. Do you have anything to say before I enter the final decree? Claire opened her mouth. For a second, I thought she might actually muster an apology. Instead, she just shook her head, tears finally spilling onto her cheeks. Not remorse, just exhaustion. Very well. Geller picked up her gavel. Based on the pleadings, the stipulation of the parties, and the evidence before this court, the marriage between Marcus Thorne and Claire Thorne is hereby dissolved on grounds of adultery and cruelty. The stipulation is incorporated into this final decree of divorce. Mrs. Thorne, you are permanently enjoined from contacting Mr. Thorne or coming within 500 feet of his residence or place of business. This matter is closed. Bang. The sound echoed in the silent courtroom. 6 months of hell, condensed into a single, sharp crack. It was over. Done. I gathered my papers, slipping them into my leather binder. Without a glance at Claire, I could feel her watching me, but I didn't look back. There was nothing left to see. As I walked out into the hallway of the Fairfax County Courthouse, the morning sun hit me through the high windows. Sarah was waiting by the double doors, holding a coffee. Congratulations. Mr. Thorne, the partners are taking you to lunch at the Capitol Grill. Thanks. Sarah, I took the coffee, the heat grounding me. I paused at the top of the steps, looking back once. Through the glass, I saw Claire still sitting at the table, her head in her hands, the legal aid kid patting her shoulder awkwardly, a small, broken thing, a cautionary tale. I turned away and descended the steps. Outside, the air was crisp, the sky a clear Virginia blue. I slid into the back of the town car Sarah had waiting. As we pulled away from the curb, I watched the courthouse shrink in the side mirror. It felt less like an ending and more like an excision. The tumor was removed. The body could heal. 2 weeks later, a forwarded letter arrived at the office. I almost tossed it unopened. Claire's name on a return address was enough to spike my blood pressure, but curiosity, or maybe the need for absolute closure, made me slit it open. Inside was a single sheet of stationery, the letterhead from some flop house in Alexandria. Marcus, I saw Ethan yesterday. He's dropped out of law school. Said I was too intense. I guess the fire burned him too. I start bartending at a place in Crystal City next week. They don't ask for bar cards, just proof you can carry a tray. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. I lost it a long time ago. Claire, I read it once. Then I fed it into the shredder on my desk. The whir of the blades was a clean, final sound. I didn't feel triumph, didn't feel vindication, just a vast, quiet space where the anger used to be. Scout, my golden retriever, lifted his head from his bed in the corner of my office, his tail thumping softly. I'd won custody of him in the settlement. He was better company than most people I knew. That evening, I took him for a long walk along the Potomac. The trail was busy with joggers and cyclists, but we kept to ourselves. Scout sniffed at the undergrowth, pulling me toward the water's edge. I let him lead, my mind finally quiet. No depositions to prepare, no evidence to log, no wife to worry about, just a rhythm of my own footsteps and the steady pull of the leash. We stopped at a bench overlooking the Kennedy Center. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of orange and gold. I thought about the ring. I'd kept in the safe for a month after the decree, a talisman against lingering doubt. Last week, I'd taken it to a jeweler on M Street and had it melted down. I'd used a platinum to have a simple cufflink made, a small, heavy disc engraved with my initials, a reminder that what was broken could be repurposed, but never restored to its original form. Scout nudged my hand with his wet nose. I scratched him behind the ears. "Come on, boy," I said, standing up. "Let's go home." Home. It wasn't a house anymore. It was a sanctuary. My study was mine again. My evenings were mine. My future was mine. I walked back to the car, Scout trotting happily beside me, his tail wagging and wide. Contented arcs. The burden of proof was no longer mine to bear. I was just Marcus Thorne, a man walking his dog, with a life that was finally, unequivocally, my own. The case was closed. The verdict was in, and I was free.